Welcome to Awakened Soul with me, Kristen. This is the place to elevate unity consciousness and create the new earth. Are you awakened to your heart and soul-led life? Are you seeking clarity, connection, and a deeper sense of purpose? You are not alone. You are part of a grand awakening, a collective shift that is transforming our world from the inside out. Join me each episode as we explore consciousness and spiritual evolution through inspiring conversations, wisdom teachings, and powerful activations. This is more than just a podcast. It's a sacred global community creating a new earth of unity, love, and freedom. So open your heart, get ready to be inspired, elevate in frequency, and awaken to your highest potential. The shift is here, and it all starts now. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Bilecki, and you are listening to Awakened Soul with Kristen on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour as we are going to go into a really empowering conversation. Today, I have an incredible brother here, Richard D. Chambers. He's a soul embodiment guide, and he works with indigenous peoples from Colombia, and he's just all around really in tune and adept in the alchemy of awakening. And so thank you, Richard, for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Happy to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So for the next hour, we are going to go with no breaks. We're just going to experience the transmission that's going to come through. And we're going to start with sharing about Kundalini Awakening and some of the experiences that we have along the way. And so, Richard, I just want to let you begin and share from your heart what you have experienced with Kundalini Awakening and how we can support people in their own experience.
Yeah, I think it's a very important conversation to have because so many people are experiencing this on the planet now, probably more than ever, just to do with, the shifting in the diamond crystalline like consciousness and the earth grids. And as the planet's coming up in frequency, it's also, supporting people coming into deeper levels of like soul embodiment. And one of those ways that happens is through Kundalini Awakening, and so that's basically when our like primal like life force starts to awaken, from the base of our spine. It's our sacred like life force energy, our fire, and it really helps us with soul embodiment. Although it is a quickening, and not everyone, I think, fully shares like the whole process of what happens. And there's so many different ways to come into a Kundalini Awakening, and there's a lot of different experiences, but it's a very, intense situation to move through. And I think it kind of gets romanticized in the spiritual communities as, this very peaceful or beautiful experience where we just go through a spontaneous Kundalini Awakening, and now we're like an awakened soul, right? But it's really not as simple as that. And there's many different, reasons for it. Like I went through mine in 2016, and there were a lot of different reasons for that. One was partly triggered by a child being born. Another one was triggered from meeting different people in my soul cluster and like soul family. You could have your Kundalini activated from divine unions and twin flames. You could also go through a Kundalini awakening, which is kind of more like a forced Kundalini awakening through like plant medicine, like bufo or ayahuasca. And that, if we go through a forced Kundalini awakening, can be very traumatizing for the individual to move through if they haven't done the level of like egoic work and soul embodiment work to be prepared for that level of experience, because it is a level of mastery to move through Kundalini Awakening. And I kind of was saying for this podcast, like, let's talk about it. Like, how do we survive a Kundalini awakening? Because that's really what it feels like, right? When you're going through such intense experience.
Mhm. Yeah, indeed. Thank you for sharing that. And so, one of the things that I really wanted to touch in on the Kundalini awakening is, all the, the physical things that can happen, the emotional things that are triggered, just the whole, really the breakdown of our reality as we know it, and having to, like you say, be in that what feels like a survival situation to understand how to surrender or allow all of that is
Mm.
broken up to alchemize and come into something new and different in all the ways that can happen. And I really appreciate this conversation. And like I was sharing before, there's so many people right now, going, well, wow, and I have to repeat this many times, and maybe you do too in your groups, that it's like awakening isn't about the rainbows and unicorns and the ease and the joy that everyone's talking about. It's like, it's deep work. And that's why we call it the great work, right? And it's going to challenge us on every level of our being. And so, let's take it from there of what you feel is, aligned to share in the process of the Kundalini awakening and what that really looks like to support people in navigating through the layers that show up through it.
I think you touched base on how our reality starts to get broken down.
Mhm.
And I was kind of fortunate in some ways. Maybe I was a little more stubborn than most, but I went through about 5 years of just having the way I perceived reality and what I thought was possible continually being broken down to where it would just open me up to a deeper understanding. And then that would be broken down, and I would be able to perceive things and see things that I didn't think were even possible have start to happen.
Mhm.
That prepared me for when I went through my Kundalini awakening, because I already was used to my reality constantly like breaking down and having big paradigm shifts of what I believe to be true. I think, and that's pretty much what spiritual awakening is, right? As well, like the way it's like waking up from a sleep. All of a sudden, you're just not able to go back into that where you were before, right? So
Mhm.
the way we perceive the world. And so I think the most important thing or to understand about a Kundalini awakening is the presence of love, because the presence of love is really what's going to help you through that experience.
Mhm.
Going into fear around the process is what really brings people into some of the things like psychosis, right? Like not being grounded in their body, like being so in their upper chakras or even out of their body from going through the Kundalini experience, that they start to go into levels of psychosis where they're really in the frontal like lobe of their brain, and the things that they're perceiving are a lot of like mental projections or egoic like programming, or the ego fighting with the process that's actually like the spiritual activation that they're going through. So the first thing with Kundalini is like knowing that we're going to be okay, knowing that you're going to be safe. Yes, there are intense symptoms. Like for me, that I felt like there were snakes that were like moving underneath my skin, just like weaving all the time when I was in that. And if I wasn't like kind of like informed or educated on that, I wouldn't have been able to stay calm through it and just kind of ride through the waves of intensity that are coming up.
Mhm.
Um, so that actually was really helped me, in terms of being able to embrace like my Kundalini awakening and not going into fear.
Yeah.
Because when we start to go into fear, then the mind starts to spin out, and all of the programs, all of those things start to really go into conflict with the experience we're having. We're not really going in, like coming into harmony. So, and knowing like what is Kundalini? Like, it's like this fire that's just being activated in your soul, in your bones, in your body, in your aura. And now all of a sudden you're starting to access things that you never had access to. So you're seeing things that you never saw before. You're burning through your karma. You're burning through your past lives. You're burning through trauma. You're burning, through all of the stuff that you haven't worked on in your life so far. Now you're going to clear a lifetime or multiple lifetimes of work, in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very quickened experience to go through, but it's a very high level of mastery too. So I personally feel people that go through Kundalini Awakenings should be, supporting other people and how to go through that as well. There's a reason why they've gone through such an intensified um, experience on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of us kind of have to walk that path first to be able to help, the next ones that are moving through it. So, I think it can be a very beautiful experience, but the reality of it is it depends on how much of your like shadow work you've integrated. It depends on how much trauma you have, and it depends on what you understand to be true and how, open and willing you are to really surrender to what, the divine plan is for you. Because you may have had a plan in your life before, but after Kundalini awakening, that completely changes. Your timelines start to collapse. Things that you weren't able to, perceive before, you see right through. And it can be a lonely, lonely time actually going through a Kundalini awakening. Like
Mm-hmm.
for myself, I didn't know anyone else really going through that when I went through mine. And I remember I was just like, don't tell anybody, don't let anybody know what you're going through, because it didn't feel safe for me to talk about it with other people. But I was turned on, and the lights like were on, and I was seeing everything. I was seeing all of our visitors and guides and spirit teams and galactics and you name it. I was able to see that. And it's, that can be, if you haven't witnessed that before, then all of a sudden it's like the way you just perceived everything is completely different, right? And sometimes you feel that you're the only one that's going through that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. Thank you for fleshing all of that out. And I can, share a few things about that and with my own experience too, where I remember it was around probably 2000 in the early 2000s, where it was like all of a sudden I was seeing energy in people's bodies and around people's bodies and understanding why their physical ailments were happening from their spiritual, or, energetic field. It's just like, okay, and it was just like these flushes of energy would just come up through my body. And it was just like, whoa, okay. And then same with you, like just these incidents in life that also help. Like I was in a relationship where it was in just really intense, constant reorganization of my relationship with myself, my relationship with reality, my relationship with people, because I was just getting literally, I call that relationship like spiritual boot camp, because it was like, it was just like everything that I thought I was, and even the parts of myself that I knew, my fears, my resistances to life, my discomforts, my judgments, my traumas were up, and it was like, you're going to face these or not. And really, there was, for me, it was like almost no choice. It's like I was doing the
Okay.
best I could to, be with them and face them. But it also was very supportive in preparation for more intense ones that were going to happen later in my life. And I can relate to you because even just 2 weeks ago, when we were having those really intense solar flares, like during the full moon and everything, my whole system was literally moving my whole nerve system in my body. I mean, and I was like facing, it was another awakening, but it was like a death. There was a death to self. There was a death to these ways that I was realizing I wasn't, supporting myself or hadn't supported myself, or ways that I was still conceiving myself trapped in reality, and the way that I perceived myself through life trapped in reality, and all these things were coming up. And it was like days of me just like, literally shaking and going through this process. And so one of the things, I think we touched, we were talking before we came on and sharing this, that it's an ongoing process. Like you went through several. I'm going through several, and I just went through one,
Yeah.
right? And I've been on this path for, a couple decades or so, so it's just recognizing this. But like you said, the support. And for those of us, because I agree, I feel like the people like us and other people have had those, are having these intense experiences, are adepts, right?
Yeah.
We've already been mystics or adepts or whatever in other lifetimes, and it's all coming alive for us now, to now step into a role of a frequency and an embodiment that's going to support everybody else and the humanity and the collective and Mother Earth and everything else right now at this time. And so as much as it's uncomfortable, I feel like we could go into some of the symptoms that happen, as well as that surrender, because that's all I could do in my life too. And I just did that over, the past couple of weeks too. I was just surrendering. I was just breathing into it and saying, "Hey, just show me like I'm here. Like I feel this." And as uncomfortable as it was, feeling like I was going to die, I was like extreme, like, and I was like, okay, let it go. Let whatever needs to happen, happen. And it's a strength. And I feel like the more, if we when we resist, because you touched on resistance, when the ego is resisting or the identity is resisting, then it gets worse, right? Like the intensity of the symptoms get worse. So maybe we could, talk about the surrender and the resistance, and then how to move through those layers of the experience.
All just very powerful points. And I think it's like, if you were to look at going through, and you mentioned about the death, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really what's happening. There's a death
Mm-hmm.
of the old version of yourself and the new version that's trying to take shape and form, but or one of the many new versions of yourself, but there's a lot of heavy lifting to kind of do in the meantime, right?
Yes.
And so if you've been through like a tower moment or an ego death, when it's like everything around you is trying to collapse and you're trying to hold on for everything for dear life, like, no, don't take that. Don't, I want to hold on to this. Like you can't, like, you just have to allow the surrender, and like you're safe and you're supported, and your highest self and your divine teams, like the universe is conspiring in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
It's not conspiring against you. Like, and I think that is huge. That's what really like helped me. I went through a complete timeline collapse of my Kundalini awakening, like the ending of a relationship. And it was just in a very like very challenging way that I wouldn't wish upon anybody. And it seemed like everything was going wrong in my life. But what was actually happening, I say this as it looked like things were falling apart, it was actually falling together. And all the things that weren't in alignment were being let go. And the more you try to hold on and fight to hold those things, they're just simply not in alignment anymore.
Yeah.
So the surrendering is knowing the universe is supporting you, like, and with that, that's how I came into divine union with my partner and my wife that I've been with, and we have a child on the way now in our sacred union. And it's like the time when we were collapsing timelines, we both went through a similar experience, not knowing each other, where it seemed like both our lives were falling apart and collapsing, but that was happening to bring us together.
Mm.
And so in the moment, it seems like sheer chaos as things are changing around you, and it's bringing up all of your fears and your traumas and your worries, right? But you have to show up for what's in front of you. So you have to show up for what you're experiencing emotionally. You have to take ownership and accountability for it and ask yourself, what is the moment like trying to teach you right now? Everything is like teaching you. There's a level of mastery as we move through something. So if you have, grief coming up or anger or whatever it may be, what is it trying to show you? What is this situation trying to teach you? Because it really is trying to help you reintegrate these aspects of yourself that are on the other side of that pain or on the other side of that trauma. There's always a part of you that is trying to like return and integrate. So that was a big like teaching for me when I went through my experience, was not looking at, not like something was happening to me but for me, really starting to embrace it, knowing that every day is going to be a wild ride. That's okay. Let's surrender, let's buckle up, and I'm going to show up in the best way that I can, without knowing that I'm not the one that's driving the car, right? Like, I might be in the vehicle, but wherever source wants to take me today, I'm going to stop, I'm going to get out, and I'm going to make the best of that situation and show up and learn from whatever that experience is, because that is the alchemy like we're moving through, right? Mm-hmm. And some of us, we just want a smooth ride, but we're talking about like high level soul mastery here. Some of us need big situations and big things to bring back, that level of stewardship or, embodiment that we're moving into. So it is really about embracing the situations that come up within our life and knowing that every moment is an opportunity to alchemize. It's an opportunity to, transcend the situation. And it's not about controlling it. And I think that's where it becomes very challenging, because we all have a plan on, Richard should be doing this and he should be here by this age and, have these things in his life. But what happens when that doesn't happen? And you can let that go and just show up in a way to allow like consciousness to work through you, allow, to show up in your presence and expression. You're going to notice those things start to magnetize and gravitate to you. But when we try to really kind of micromanage source in a way, it's just different after going through like a high level, like spiritual awakening. You don't fall into like the previous paradigms. And so it's more about learning how to, be in the co-creation with source, where before we just thought we were the creation, right?
Indeed. Yeah, I like that. Like wherever source wants to take me, you're just allowing the flow. And that is really that ego death, right? Is allowing that ego to the personality we've formed, right? Through the conditions of this life and maybe other lifetimes that are still feeding into the ego and the identity, to say, okay, okay, what's here? Show me. And I have a question for you, because in a group the other day I was sharing, because this is something that I've been shown and I'm curious of what your perspective is that, when you were talking about, if we're on a timeline, right, and things are coming in at certain times, or maybe that doesn't happen because someone made a different choice, and, maybe the soul agreements of our soul family on this planet didn't follow through because of one thing or another, right? And there's no judgment in that. It's just a part of the human free will experience too, right? But I feel, and I've been shown too, that it's a choice. Like if we're not in a certain space at a certain time, right, then maybe that Kundalini activation awakening has to happen in that abrupt, intense way. And that our awakening is a choice on our soul level, that, okay, we're going to do this at some point in time in our life, in this body, on this planet at this time, so that, we can show up. And the one thing that you were saying earlier is what I was really getting, when that energy is flowing through the body and we just have to surrender, that it's also memory. that we can trust in the fact that this energy is not something foreign and something bad, like you were saying. It's like a memory of the true self that's wanting to anchor in and come alive, with the truth of who we are. So, yeah, there's a couple things there.
Yeah, I think in terms of it being like a memory, we're like little beacons of light that are acting as a conduit, right? Once we
Yeah.
start, going through our spiritual awakenings, it just, if you were to think of like, an electrical grid and for the energy to move through, it's like, okay, let's go through that Kundalini awakening, that person over there. Just the way also for, the earth energies and the celestial energies, like to bridge,
Yeah.
to bridge, like, whether you want to call it heaven on earth or for the higher frequency templates and instruction sets to come in, they come in through like embodiment and being embodied here. And then they're able to go out into the collective consciousness for others, right? So, yeah, I think, what was the first thing you said?
Yeah, yeah, great. Yeah, no, I love what you just shared about that though. But yeah, it's a choice. It's a choice that on some level we made as a soul, an agreement that we were going to wake up or have our awakening in some fashion, right? In this body, in this life at this time.
Yeah. To say it's just like one way, I think is, kind of, it's very different, I think, for a lot of people, but there would definitely, nothing's forced. Even if you go through a forced Kundalini awakening, it's
Mhm.
not forced upon you. There's probably some kind of soul contract or soul agreement that is saying like, okay, now's the time to step into action or to go through this, because either maybe you haven't done particular things that you said you were going to do by this time. So now we're going to activate Kundalini to accelerate that. Or it can be that you have like a soul level agreement. I always see like, if you think we've spent so many lifetimes being in the temples and in the mountains, right? And in these sacred places. And then it's like we left those temples and mountains and we decided to go out into the world, to come down from those places. And that's like this lifetime. This lifetime, we are here to walk in the world and to experience like what it is like and what is actually happening here on the planet. So then when we go through the Kundalini awakenings and these spiritual awakenings, we understand the shift and the transformation that needs to occur because we're very connected. Like we're here, we've experienced, we've grown up in the unawakened like society and world, and we're kind of looking to fix it from the inside out by doing that. So I do believe that I would say for the majority, yeah, it is, an agreement and a contract that you've decided to come in to that form of awakening. And I think this is, we were talking earlier about the different types of like Kundalini awakenings, because I've, been through like kind of multiple levels of Kundalini awakening. The first one I went through, I was completely just activated by galactics. And I was lying in my bed and I thought I saw Mother Mary come into the room, and I squinted and realized that it was all these like galactic feline beings, which I had never seen before. And they just said to me, it's time. We got it. It's time for you now. And then it was boom. That was it. My Kundalini went and everything was, I was able to, see, and all those things turned on. Then I had other forms of Kundalini awakenings when I met, people within like my soul groups and soul clusters. And there's a contract that you have with that other individual to either get some of your codes or soul pieces back or exchange like codes to help them in their own awakening, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we go through Kundalini awakenings when we meet someone within our lineage, like within our soul lineage, and it could be through eye contact, it could be through conversation or just hearing their voice, or it could just be in presence as well.
Yeah.
And that's a soul agreement, right? Because we all have like, there's laws around energetic integrity. It's like We're not here to oppose anything, you know. So when these situations happen, there is a form of agreement or a contract that is bringing it forward. Um, and on some of those levels, if not, it probably is on some level we're just not aware of, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. I just want to share for those of you who are just joining us for this conversation. I'm here with Richard D. Chambers, and welcome to Awaken Soul with Kristen on Transformation Talk Radio. We are diving into the different levels and aspects of Kundalini awakening and awakening itself. And so, if you have any questions, in about 10 minutes, we're going to take questions. So if you want to start writing those in chat, we can explore those. And we're just going to continue the conversation a bit here too. So thank you. You know, it's interesting because I have, when I was living in California in my early 20s, when my first real kind of movement happened, as I was talking before, and I was seeing all of this energy, I feel that I was in cohort with many soul tribe or soul members of my monad or cluster, right? And was so supported in ways that I didn't recognize sometimes till later either, going, wow, just by living in this certain place and these people around me, I actually had the space to allow these things to move. Like I actually lived with a couple and did a work exchange on their farm, and they had been doing spiritual work for many, many years, you know? And so, and we talked about things and did things, but it was more of that, just the space of their home and the space that they embodied. And a lot of times I was by myself when you know, things were happening, but it was just recognizing like, wow, that was a safe place for everything to start to come alive in me and start to process it. Even if I wasn't having direct conversations with them about it, sometimes I was, but there was just like, you know, so it's like even just that experience of just being someplace that, you know, we agreed or came alive for us, that is allowing it for it to happen. And you know, when I was having the galactic awakenings too, it was like Metatron, Melchizedek, Mother Mary, you know, the Lyrans, Arcturians, they were all just like, okay,
Yeah.
let's go. You know, it was like a full on, you know, multi-level, planetary, multi-dimensional training that was ongoing for quite some time. And that was in 2013 when that one happened, you know, and so you know, just the levels and layers that happen. But one of the things that I was thinking about was for those people where it's so intense, like you were talking about before, because I've engaged with those people who have had those Kundalini awakenings that are seen as a psychosis, right? And
Yeah.
then, you know, people don't understand it and they're put in mental hospitals rather than, you know, being supported for their reality breaking down, you know, their perceptions breaking down, and, you know, supporting them that way. And when I lived in California, there was actually an organization that supported people through those things, you know, because it was more of a thing in California at that time. You know, it's like people knew about spiritual awakening. Uh, but I knew this woman, and I didn't know her during the her Kundalini awakening. I knew her post, but she told me her story, and maybe others who are listening can relate to this level of where, you know, she was getting these messages to stop working and doing certain things, but she couldn't quite conceive of doing that. And then all of a sudden, waves of energy started hitting her where she couldn't even get up out of her bed in the morning to walk to her car to go to work, but she would struggle and force herself and do it. And then things just started breaking down. And then her whole body received so much energy that her, like, same thing, her whole reality fell apart. And she had to have people come over and help her eat, help her move, help her do things until everything acclimated, you know, to her to be able to, but, you know, she lost her job, you know, everything fell apart, right? But
Yeah.
it did start a whole new trajectory. It was like she was receiving the information to stop doing what she was doing. And this is where we were talking about earlier, where the ego identity can come in and be like, no, but I gotta make money, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, because it was mainstream reality. She didn't have that other alternate perception yet until it was like, we're gonna lay you flat then. You know? So just some support for people in that type of experience, maybe, of since you kind of experienced it in a way too.
Yeah. So first, if you're going through like a Kundalini awakening and you don't feel like safe or you have a lot of fear coming up, then you definitely want to connect with someone who is trustworthy, who has been through the experience before, uh, and even have like guidance and mentorship through it. Because you know just an example, like how well do you know yourself in dealing with change? Because some people can move through change really well. Other ones, it is like crippling to go through a form of change. So on this level of change, like you're going through it whether you want to or not. So it's like having like guidance, mentoring, or like support through it, body work as well, releasing trauma from the body, making sure you're doing your best to stay grounded and honoring your process, because it's going to be a little different for each person. But like I said, you need love around you. You need to be in a loving environment. If you're in a toxic relationship, get out, because you cannot go through like Kundalini awakenings like in spaces that don't feel safe, because it's just going to trigger all kinds of trauma. And that's when you're more likely going to go into like psychosis, because you're going to be questioning everything in your reality already. So it's interesting the story you shared, because mine was, I was hearing about people going through Kundalini awakenings and they got to like stay home and like just take time off from work and integrate these. I was working in the corporate world and I was going through my Kundalini awakening, and uh, I was just like, why am I here? Like everything is melting around me, and I'm just having such a hard time even putting sentences together. And I'd be sitting in boardroom meetings and seeing like three different galactic like heads on people and just being like, I knew they were this and I knew they were that. And, and I would be sitting in my front of my computer, like trying to type, and 3 hours would go by and I realized I didn't do one thing. Like I was just staring at my screen and it was like a blink of an eye. And I was just like, it was such an intense experience. And I used to ask myself, how come I'm in these places? Like why? And what was interesting during my Kundalini awakening, I went into a lot of very like dense urban areas, a lot of areas, that were incredibly populated. And I felt like it was also bringing like awakening codes into those areas as well. And I traveled all over the country like during that time as well, through that position. And the moment I embraced it all shifted and left. Wow. Right. But I was in like, the moment I went into full surrender with it is when it all shifted and the next thing like opened up to me. So in terms of like, if you're in psychosis, you definitely need support like coming back into your body, because most of the time we're in psychosis, there is a trauma that's not allowing our like spirit or our energy to be really deeply connected in with the physical vessel. And there's that feeling of where we're not in harmony with the body. Like, so it's almost like the body starts to reject the spirit a little bit. Yeah. And that's kind of where I would say someone definitely needs like help, like navigating through that, because it's almost like unconscious, like at that point. Yeah. And they'll not be making decisions that are going to be supportive for their life or for their experience. Mm-hmm. So if that's you and you've been going through a really hard time and you're not understanding, what's happening to you, well, you need to find someone who's been through that before so they can like guide, coach, or support you, through that until you feel like confident with it. But the main thing is like getting back in our bodies, right? Yeah. Think after it, like, and also knowing like your Kundalini awakening isn't about just sending you off into the cosmos for the rest of your incarnation here, as many of our like light workers and starseeds, we just, tend to be up there sometimes, but it's
Yeah.
to support with making the changes on the planet. Like here, yes, you'll have access to that, but you should be able to still function like in the world. If you're not able to make simple things and take care of things in your life, then I would say that's kind of like a red flag in your spiritual awakening that needs attention. And
Mhm.
because yes, you're going to have downtime, time of rest, and time to be able to integrate things, and times that are good and times that are more challenging. But ideally, the whole idea of going through spiritual awakening is to, you know, bring that higher level of consciousness like into the planet through our own like embodiment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that because it really is the embodiment piece that's why we're awakening. To be in the body, to recognize the body as the temple for the soul and to allow the technology, the intelligence that this body is going through. And so it's intense on the body, right? But the body eventually will know how to deal with it as we get support to do it. It'll integrate the frequencies, the information, the experiences, and yeah, even just a couple of weeks ago, like I said, when I was going through that really intense process and my whole body was like, just shaking in such a, high level frequency of energy. And I was going through that ego death. All I could do was just go outside and lay on the ground and put my feet on the ground as much as possible. I was going in the water, I was getting my feet on the earth and just having that conduit, that electrical magnetic field that could flow and ground myself and lay down as much as possible too. But I think that is a challenge, when we're having those experiences to know how to ground because the energy is so high and so intense and everything is so up in the air. But yeah, if we have any questions, we'd love to take questions right now so that we can support you in your awakening process. Since Richard and I, we've combined, we both have a lot of really good experience in our own personal experiences in our life and our awakening processes, as well as supporting others, through theirs. So if anyone has questions, please send them in and we'll see if we can get to them. One of the things that I would love to talk about as those are coming in is surrender.
Mhm.
Because you mentioned, you're in that corporate experience. Those are wild experiences to have when you're in
Yeah.
a corporate setting, right? And, for myself, I was in a lucrative business with a partner and I just surrendered to it. I was like, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done. I'm just going to live my purpose no matter what. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I'm done with all of this. And
Mhm.
I shifted and I moved on. And it's not always easy, but when you can feel that call of the soul and the nudge and the everything. So I'm wondering what your surrender was really like. What did that look like or feel like? What was the, moment that you knew you wanted to make that choice? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like a constant like evolution, right? Of surrender. Um, One, it comes down to feeling like safe and trust. That's a big one. And it's also very liberating when you start to surrender things in your life. Like I used to have some very like challenging decisions come up in my life. Like when I was in, this relationship that was just, hurting me in so many different ways and teaching
Mhm.
me in so many others.
Yeah.
And I actually couldn't make that choice to like leave that relationship. I couldn't, even though I knew what I was supposed to do. So what I did, that was my first like form of surrendering. I like to change the verbiage and the way I look at things. And I would, go into meditation and I would ask like my highest self to align my relationships for my highest, like any and my timeline. So what's meant to be will be, and anything that's truly not in my highest alignment, to just allow that to go without feeling then I need to say this is what needs to happen, that needs to happen. And I would align that situation like to divine grace, like, you know, that was always a big one, because when I align things in my life to divine grace, what I notice is if they're meant for me, they get closer.
Yeah.
And if they're not meant for me, they start to fall away. So when you start to give state those level of command, like from your highest self, it is really, now you have to surrender, because you've asked to kind of hand the situation over under divine grace that's unfolding in your life. So now you have to show up for what's in front of you. And
Mm.
that takes away the pressure of having to make some of these, like, intense like choices within your life. But you have to know what's being brought to you, you're meant to like move through. So I think
Mhm.
uh people may say, like, I get this all the time with people who are trying to figure out if it's like a twin flame relationship. And I always feel like I could tell them, but it's not my place to tell them. Like, they need to make their own choices and decisions, you
Mhm.
know, unless it's something that would be really harmful, I would tell them. But for the most, they need to come in, they need to be empowered in their choices and to make that discovery for themselves, right? Otherwise, they'll loop on it. So I'll tell them to align that situation, align your relationship under divine grace. If it's meant to be, it will. And then they'll say, like, it's the weirdest thing. Like, they've just kind of fallen away. Or they'll say, like, wow, we're ever so close now. And it's just been really great.
Yeah.
I think to me that has been a lesson in like surrender, knowing we don't have to control and micromanage everything. Surrendering is about
Yes.
being present in your life, showing up for what's in front of you,
Yeah.
being that best version that you possibly can, whatever that is on that day in that moment,
Yeah.
and knowing wherever you are, it's okay. Like, it's
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
Source has your back. Align your life under divine grace, your relationships, your situation, and start to show up and, have faith.
Yes, have faith. Thank you. Well, articulated, because I also share pretty much that same mode of thinking. Is I'll do the same thing. I'll be like, just show me I'm here, and
Mhm.
whatever is present today, I'm present for. And if I'm hearing a nudge or whatever, then I'm aligning myself with it. I'm aligning myself with it through my heart, my body, my mind, and whatever step there is that I perceive today or the next day or whatever people show up in my life or resources or opportunities, then that is the path. That's the path being laid before me, and I want to trust in that. I want to trust in those things. And one other piece, I can see you want to say something. So, the other thing is too is one of the things that I have done is I'm like, okay, if I made this choice to be here in this body and for my awakening to be happening, then there must be a field that is holding and supporting and the people and the experiences available for me to go through this experience as well. And then it's like, okay, then I'm going to trust in that and be present and allow myself to experience that, welcoming of whatever those are over time, without expectation, and patience. Yeah.
I think to add on to that is like to really like challenge ourselves in how we look or perceive the world
Yes.
and our reality.
Mm.
Because on one side, we do manifest, like, we are manifestors, and you can, whatever the reality like you're in, congratulations, because you've contributed to manifesting that,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So whether it's whatever the experience is, there's a part you've played in that manifestation.
Hmm.
So the big thing for me was realizing sometimes to get where we're going, like, things need to be let go.
Yeah.
It's like when our capacity or our field or our manifestation energy is being completely full for us to get into that new frequency wave or a new job or relationship, we have to let go of certain things in our life. And it may it's not a bad thing when things start going. I call it like a growth period or a contraction period. And it's when everything's coming up and it feels like, things just suck. Like it
Yeah.
feels like, uh, the universe is against you, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is things are coming up and they're being released to try to create space for you, because you can't bring that where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big shift. So now when I go through these like, ego deaths or these growth periods, I'm like, all right, bring it on. Like
Yes.
everything is coming up. This is alchemy in its finest. And I am going to show up in the best way I can go through this, because I know what's on the other side of this is some rapid up leveling in consciousness. So I'm glad that I'm second guessing everything, that I'm in a huge doubt cycle, that it feels like it's the end of whatever, because that means what's coming next is that much bigger, that much more beautiful, and that much more great. I used to kick and scream through those. And when you kick and scream through your doubt cycle or growth period, like how well does that go for you, right? Not too well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, so by realizing like it's just the natural flow of like evolution, things contract so they expand. But
Yes.
once it can't expand anymore, it's got to contract so
Yep.
it can expand more.
Mm-hmm.
But when it contracts, what does that look like? Well, now maybe you lose your job, or maybe this or that. And now that relationship ends. Now all this trauma is coming up. But that's the opportunity for alchemy, how you move through that experience, showing, guess what? I've learned this lesson now. I am ready for something different.
Yes.
And then you expand into something greater, right?
Yes.
It's such a simple teaching, but a profound teaching that took me forever to figure out.
Yeah, it's a very profound teaching. Thank you. And yes, I'm right there with you. Have had those moments where I'm like, I'm gonna, fight, or is this really what I should be doing? What's that? But then the more we go through it, the more practice, then we get to that space as the alchemist and be like, yeah, like you said, bring it on. I'm the same way. I'm like, even just when I was in a heap of, energy moving a couple of weeks ago, I was like, show me, just I'm here. Like let it all come up. And I actually was sitting in gratitude, even in some of the deepest moments of discomfort where I was
Mm,
up all night because I couldn't sleep because the energy was so, I was just like, thank you for moving this energy that needed to be moved so that I can, like you said, embody a new experience of myself, of life, and have the perspectives and the experiences that are, aligned for me to now come into harmony with and come into acceptance and connection with. And yeah, it's that deep curiosity and that deep willingness to go through the adventure of life rather than the static things that, can bring us fear. And I know there's security. And like you say, if I lose my job, well, it's like that, there's that releasing and going, okay, well, I saw that as my security, but obviously it's not because it's gone, right?
yeah.
Let's trust in the soul source security that's moving me into something new and different,
Mhm.
that's maybe going to actually bring me more connection to myself, more joy, more, whatever it is that we're here to receive and have. Yeah. So we actually have to, such a great, fabulous conversation, Richard, but we're in a moment now to start wrapping up. I'd love, Richard, if you want to share how people can get in touch with you, your website or any other ways. Yeah.
Yeah, you can get a hold of me through my website, which is starseedschangingtheworld.com. You can also, follow me on Instagram, Richard underscore D underscore chambers, or email me at richard at starseedschangingtheworld.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Richard is powerful in what he does. It's nice to have another soul embodiment guide friend and, brother in the world that I know is, doing his work and, supporting others on the path. And so I appreciate that deeply. I really do. It's nice to know you're here, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with everyone in this experience. And so, everyone, I appreciate you being present with us today. If you Just to let you know, we are here every first and third Wednesday of the month at 9 a.m. Pacific. We connect. Sometimes I'm here just speaking. Sometimes I have a wonderful, amazing guest like Richard. And if you would like to connect with me, please go to awakenedsoul.net. I offer one-on-one sessions, mentorships, and if you would like to, we're having a solstice new moon cacao ceremony online Monday, June 23rd. You can join us for that. You can go to awakenedsoul.net and go to events. You'll see it there. And I'd like to just leave you in this moment with some of the wise words, that Richard was sharing and that we were sharing, is that, your awakening really is a beautiful choice of embodiment to be the highest potential of who you are on this planet. And so allowing yourself to connect with yourself in what's happening, receive support when needed, and have trust, have faith, and allow yourself to recognize the beauty of what takes place through your experience. And you're a beautiful being. So thank you, Richard, for being here. I appreciate you. Yeah. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you. Our next episode is July 2nd, Wednesday, July 2nd at 9 a.m. Pacific. And we'll explore another illuminating awakening experience. Have a great week, and I'll see you back here next time. Thank you. Be well. Thank you for joining Awakened Soul, your place to elevate unity consciousness and to create the new earth. Join me, Kristen Bilecki, every first and third Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. For more information and to connect with me, go to awakenedsoul.net. Explore how I can support you on your awakening journey through my online gatherings, sessions, and mentorships. Don't miss a show. Subscribe now to take the steps towards a more awakened, heart and soul-led life. Until next time, live, love, laugh, and be free.